This is BBC One. Now we join Sue Cameron in the Newsnight studio for an update on the European Summit.
Good morning. In the past hour, European community leaders have reached agreement on political union. The social chapter, which had been the sticking point of the negotiations for Britain, has been dropped. The other 11 may hammer out a separate deal on social policy, but it'll be outside the Treaty of Rome. That means it won't apply to Britain, although Number 10 has just been stressing that the UK will adopt any social pressures that it thinks would benefit British workers and British industry. Mr Major's expected to report back on what his officials are saying is an excellent solution to the Commons later this afternoon, providing he's back in time. Now over to Jeremy Paxman in Maastricht.
Yes, within the last hour, as you say, the arrangements on the social chapter, which had threatened to sink the negotiations here, have been struck out of the treaty. The summit is concluding. The British believe this is a major triumph because they have got rid at a stroke of the element in the treaty to which they most objected. But the questions have already begun. What price, if any, did the British have to pay in terms of concessions elsewhere in the treaty? Is this another potential two-tier Europe? Legally, what status will the protocol have among the 11? And since all community citizens are considered equal under community law, what will the European Parliament, the European Commission, and most of all the European Court have to say on the subject? When the British government spokesman was asked the legal implications, he just replied, "I'm not a lawyer." Now, in the last 2 or 3 minutes, Ruud Lubbers, the Dutch Prime Minister, has started holding the final end of conference, press conference in the large auditorium here, where I think we can take a few words of what he has to say on what's happened over the last 2 days.
Like the cohesion. In fact, there again, all 12 could agree eventually on the common approach. And that is a very important aspect of the European community indeed. As well, the cohesion in terms.
Well, a few moments ago, Mr. Lubbers was appearing very upbeat and was also saying that Jacques Delors will be pleased with the outcome here. To get some reaction from some other European leaders, we began by speaking to Charlie Haughey, the Prime Minister of Ireland. We asked him whether this wasn't a defeat for the 11 and a victory for Britain.
In fact, what has happened is that there is a limited chapter on social provisions still in the treaty, but the other 11 member states have decided to have an agreement between themselves on the implementing the social charter. Great Britain will not be part of that separate agreement on the social charter.
Will that not be outside existing community institutions?
No, there's a lot of legal argument went on about that, but it will in fact avail of the community institutions.
Well, now with me is Peter Snow, who's been following these negotiations, these most exciting developments over the last last hour or so. Peter, what is the mood at present? I mean, is it seen as a great setback or a great triumph or what?
For who? Mr. Major? The British officials are throwing their hats in the air. We haven't seen Mr. Major yet, but I expect he'll be throwing his hat pretty high in the air as well.
The community doesn't seem that downcast about it.
No, I mean, look, I think one's got to see this Treaty of Maastricht as it will be. It won't be signed here, the Treaty of Maastricht. It'll now be drafted in detail and signed in, what, a month or two's time, but maybe the 12 will come back and sign it. If you look at the thing as a whole, the thing will be remembered 10 years from now as the moment that Europe launched itself irreversibly on a single currency, with Britain preserving the right to itself to opt in at a later stage. That's what it'll be remembered for. Now, in exchange for that concession, if you like, by the British in accepting that this treaty was to lead to an irreversible process towards a single currency, with the British reserving this right to opt out, although the others have serious doubts about whether the British can ever afford to be left out, the British have been given the social deal, which the others, I must say, I think the others will find it rather difficult to explain. But clearly Mr. Major's won a bit of a triumph here. But he will have his trouble with the Labour Party at home. He will have to explain it away in those terms. He will also have to explain to the Europeans in his party, and of course the other European partners whenever he meets them again, how he felt able to, as it were, opt Britain out of this, for the others, very important part of the treaty arrangements. Nevertheless, seen as a whole, the deal is good for all of them.
There are some quite considerable complications in all of this, aren't there?
Yes, I mean...
Legal complications.
Yes, the intriguing question is whether the 11 can now go away, tie up a deal on this new social agreement that they will have on the social chapter that's now, although as Charlie Hockey says, not completely removed from the treaty, it's largely removed from the treaty, whether they can now tie up a deal between themselves on this and operate within the existing institutions. Use the Commission, use the Parliament, the Council, and so on. Now, what I was doing just now was talking to the Portuguese Foreign Ministry spokesman, Fernando Balsina, and I asked him how he thought the thing would work.
For me, somehow a community within the community, something like that. 11 doing social policy instead of 12.
But they have to go away now, do they, and negotiate their own treaty on social policy?
I don't think if it is necessary. I think that somehow a protocol or something like that will be enough to deal with this problem.
We are being told that the social chapter in the draft treaty has been dropped. It's gone.
It's gone,
right.
Yes.
What's the effect of all this? Does it make it a two-tier community? Does it make it two types of community for workers?
I don't think so. One is the workers in Britain, the second one, the workers in the all 11 countries.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've time for tonight. We'll leave you, just before we hand you back to London, with the news that the social chapter, which the British had so objected to in the draft treaty on European Union here in Maastricht, has been struck out of the treaty, and the summit is concluding here. Back to you in London, Sue.
Thank you, Jeremy. Well, reaction is now beginning to come into the news. The Labour Party has reacted. Its shadow employment spokesman, Tony Blair, says that the deal means isolation for Britain yet again. It was, he said, a tragedy for the long-term interests of Britain in Europe. Well, I'm joined now by Paddy Ashdown on the phone. Paddy Ashdown, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. Paddy Ashdown, what's your reaction to news of this deal?
Well, I'm delighted the deal has been concluded, of course. I think, as Peter Snow has rightly said, that this would be seen by historians as a decisive moment towards the irreversible process of European integration. That will not be very welcome to many in Mr. Major's party, but I'm bound to say that I think overall, and the heart of this deal is not the social chapter, it is in fact economic and monetary union. And I'm bound to say that overall this deal has been driven by the needs of the divisions of the Conservative Party rather than the long-term prosperity of Britain and Europe. And we, all of us, will pay a real price for the uncertainty of Britain's opt-out clause in economic and monetary union. We'll pay that price in higher interest rates, in lost inward investment, and the City of London will pay a direct and immediate price because, of course, the City of London now has no hope of being the site for the European Central Bank, which is so important for the institutions of monetary union in Europe.
Do you see the deal as a two-tier system in Europe?
Well, in a way, yes. And Britain has, of course, now got more boat holes than a Gruyere cheese in this. They've got themselves boat holes in every aspect. And personally, as you know, I have serious reservations about the social chapter. I don't think they were applicable to Britain. I don't think they'll be good for Europe. But the fact of it is that the government wasted all its negotiating powers on futile and illusory matters like federalism, translating it from the word to a set of words which meant the same things, when it could have negotiated a deal on the social chapter which would have meant we'd have been in Europe rather than outside it, and that Europe itself would have developed in a way which was, I think, beneficial rather than unbeneficial, as is the case at present.
Paddy Ashdown, thank you very much indeed. Well, that's the latest update from the European Summit in Maastricht. There'll be more details in Breakfast News at 6:30 on BBC One. But from all of us on Newsnight for now, a very good night.
Well, whatever the results of the European Summit in Maastricht, there's one thing that will never change, and that's the good old British weather, which for our close-down summary looks like this. As well as freezing fog in places, particularly in Yorkshire and Humberside, there'll also be a widespread sharp frost, severe in some parts. Tomorrow, most of the fog will lift during the day to give some hazy sunshine, though the far northwest of Scotland may have a little rain. Temperatures will be a degree or two lower than today and may stay below freezing in the few areas where fog persists.
Hi there. If you're a motorist, watch this space. That could be your car in a fog. Not much for a driver coming up behind to see, is it? That's better. Now, most of us who've got rear fog lamps don't need much telling to use them when it's really foggy. After all, who needs a rear-end shunt? But did you know that rear fog lights are 20 times brighter than ordinary rear lights? And that means if you also use them in traffic at night, then look what can happen. Dazzle. And if the windscreen is wet, then the driver behind could be in real trouble. Because if you brake, the chances are he won't even see your brake lights come on. So, only use rear fog lamps when there's a real danger that otherwise you won't be seen. And the rest of the time, think of the poor driver behind. He doesn't want to run into you, but if you dazzle him, he just might. Beware of rear dazzle.
That was a public information film. Well, on that timely reminder, we end our programmes for this evening on BBC One. But just before you go, don't forget that you're welcome to join our non-stop 24-hour colleagues on BBC Radios 1 and 2. We hope you've enjoyed our programmes this evening and that you'll press the number 1 button on your remote control again very soon. Until then, on behalf of tonight's team, this is Reg Sanders at the Television Centre in London, wishing you, especially if you're on your own, a very safe and peaceful night. Good night.